The gauntlet has been thrown down for the Bearcats after the Utah loss. They have to be perfect the rest of the way.
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bearcats. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm all Cincinnati all the time. I have been a SID in multiple athletic departments and a season ticket holder to Bearcats football for the past 7 seasons, and I'm glad that you're alongside me here today. Locked On Bearcats is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Bearcats, every single day. And on today's podcast, a little bit later on in the show, there are some early season trends on the hardwood, especially the fast pace of the offense to keep a close eye on as we head toward Georgia State on Friday night. We'll discuss that a little bit later on and hear from Wes Miller on those things. In just a few minutes, I want your take on the expectation shift that I am sensing around UC athletics, specifically with football and with men's basketball. But we will begin with the task at hand for Scott Satterfield. That's all in today's episode that is brought to you by FanDuel. New users can place a $5 wager, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. Download that FanDuel app today. And we will begin, and make no mistake about it, the Bearcats have to win out if they're going to go to Dallas. They have to win out if they want to have a chance at the playoff, because I think they've got to win the Big 12 championship to make it to the playoff. I think with the loss against Utah, the Bearcats are no longer considered a team that could earn an at-large bid, as it were. There's a lot of challenges that have been levied, some very unspoken, at least from the national media and from the rest of the country at large, when it comes to Cincinnati football after that Utah loss, and rightfully so. When you lose by 31 to anyone, people doubt what you did before that. And that's indicative in a couple of different things. I mean, they're not ranked in the top 25 of the first college football playoff ranking, and I understand. Knowing that they're not going to be in at large, that's not a huge deal, but that's a little bit of a, that's a recognizing, right? Couldn't think of that word for some reason, but a recognizing of what UC has done, and the fact that they are not in that top 25 on the initial college football rankings shows that what they have done is not worthy of recognition for the national media. Take with that what you will. I still think that there were some good wins, but the way that Iowa State has kind of fallen off, the way that Kansas has fallen off, we felt really good about those wins whenever the Bearcats got them, and now they don't look so good if you're talking about the big resumes and all that other stuff. So in order to prove it, in order to garner the attention that the Bearcats deserve and this talented football team should be getting, they're going to have to prove it by beating Arizona in 2 weeks. They're going to have to really prove it by beating BYU in 3 weeks, and they'll have to prove it by beating TCU. Now, obviously, you're probably thinking, well, Jeff, that's not really what a football player should be worried about right now, and you're right. Football players should be worried about what's right in front of them. It's the bye week right now. How do you get better during the bye week? But you and we can talk about the fact that the Bearcats need to win out. They've got to play near perfect football for the next 3 weeks just to get to Dallas, and then they will likely be facing, my guess would be Texas Tech. But, I mean, there's a chance that they would have a rematch against BYU as well. If BYU is able to beat Texas Tech this week, that's going to be a really fun game to watch on Saturday, by the way. BYU and Texas Tech. But it's interesting to me because the national recognition for the Bearcats has evaporated, and you can see that on some other different things. I love looking at K Ford, and that's really something that Chad Brindle has gotten me onto. I know that he talks a lot about K Ford. It's a website that really does a lot of different analytical looks and things like that at football teams, and gives you projections and what's going to happen next and what they think is going to happen based on what has already happened, and lots of good stuff there. Great stuff for a football fan. But if you look up K Ford, or I think it's just kford.com, whatever it is, they give the Bearcats an 8% chance, 8% chance to win out. So as much as the challenge is in front of them, and that's what they need to do, K Ford thinks it's very, very unlikely. And when you break it down, this is how they come to that number. They give the Bearcats a 59% chance to beat Arizona. I find that intriguing. I think that that's a little low, but again, there's a lot of maths and stuff that go into this that I am not necessarily understanding of, that K4 does to come up with these sorts of projections. But 59% chance to beat Arizona, 38% chance to beat BYU, and a 37% chance to beat TCU. Yes, according to K Ford, there's a better percentage chance to beat BYU at home than to beat TCU on the road. And resume-wise, or at least according to K Ford's estimation of resumes, the better win of the three obviously is BYU. But they find it will be harder for the Bearcats to beat TCU than BYU. It's intriguing to me, if nothing else. But looking at the matchups here, BYU has the best defense of the three, but all three schools have pretty decent offenses. Arizona's the worst of the three, but they're not like a bad offense by any stretch. And as we've talked with Chad, and we'll probably talk with Russ Heltman a little bit later on this week, Arizona's got a pretty good pass defense. So it's going to be about the balance on offense and how they're able to attack Arizona from multiple directions. But I really think that it's going to be difficult for the Bearcats to win out. And that's tough because I think that we shifted our thoughts, and I really want to dive into this in just a minute. And I'm curious, did you shift with me? Because I felt like there were a lot of folks at Nippert Stadium that did. After they beat Iowa State, and after they beat Oklahoma State and Baylor, and we really got that 7-game winning streak going, the expectation shifted. Okay, this is not just a bowl team. This is not just a let's get on down to the Liberty Bowl or something like that. And, we're happy with the season. Let's see how far we can go. And it feels like Dallas is doable. And when you control your own destiny like the Bearcats do, it is doable. It's just you do have to win out. There is no more losses that you can kind of stomach with this thought process. So are you going to be happy if they don't? I would like to know. Please drop down into the comments section. Leave me your thoughts on that. And I'll try to respond to everybody as you do that. But when it comes to this Bearcats football team, like I coming into the year, we were hoping for 6, maybe 7. Well, we're already there. So what's next? These last 3 games are going to be really tough to win out. As K Ford is saying, 8% chance. So flip that around, 92% chance that the Bearcats do not win out. And if they don't win out, let's put it this way. If you don't win all 3 and you lose one more conference game, then you're tied with Utah, and we know what that means because Utah's got the tiebreaker. The Bearcats have to finish the season with only one conference loss if they hope to get to Dallas. They will need other things to happen, and there's still a chance that other things happen. But consider this, that Texas Tech, they face BYU this week. And then they've got a mamby-pamby schedule the rest of the way. I think they have Baylor and West Virginia. BYU has a more interesting schedule, but it's not as tough. They face Kansas State and Kansas later on after facing Texas Tech and Cincinnati, because they have 4 games left. Their last bye week was this past week. But like really diving into the scenarios, I would like to wait. Hopefully we don't have to do that, but I would like to wait until after the Bearcats suffer another loss to really worry about all of that, because there's so many scenarios that have to play out for that to work in the Bearcats' favor. And you make it easy on yourself by just winning out, as much as people don't believe that that's going to happen. But it's clear that with all of this, that expectations have shifted. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I feel like, there has been an awakening. Have you felt it? That's kind of what it feels like as a Bearcats fan. Our expectations have changed, which is a great thing. And when it comes to football and even men's basketball that we'll discuss here in a little bit, I think it's important that we understand what those expectations are. You got to head on over to FanDuel right now. If you've got expectations on what's going to happen in the next Bearcats basketball game, FanDuel is the place to go for that. Actually, looking at the spread right now, I don't see a spread for the Georgia State game. I'm sure that's going to come up as we get closer to Friday night's basketball game, but we can look at some futures for the Bearcats as far as football goes. They have moved back to winning the conference championship game. Their odds are at plus 950. So almost 10-1. It's kind of hovering around those 10-1 odds now that they've lost to Utah. So that's intriguing to see. Their chances of making the college football playoff totally hinge on that. I don't believe that they're an at-large bid, so those odds are pretty much the same. But if you want to jump into all the action, and if you're a brand new user, you can place a $5 wager, and you can win $300 if that $5 wager wins. I always recommend doing money line for your first $5 winning wager because that's more likely to happen. Let's keep an eye on the money line for the Bearcats and Georgia State, because I think that will be one that would be a good idea to place your $5 wager on to win $300 over on FanDuel. And you can use those $300 in bonus bets across the FanDuel app. Download FanDuel today. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats part of your day. I encourage you to make it part of your everyday routine by hitting the subscribe button right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. Appreciate all of our everydayers out there, and those of us that make those of you who make Locked On Bearcats your first listen every single day. And also make sure you click that like button and jump down into the comments section. Helps the algorithm here on YouTube. Makes it easier for Bearcats fans to find the show. So, all right, we're talking about, the Bearcats could win out, and the Bearcats go to Dallas, and they could win the Big 12 championship in football, which is a crazy thing because our expectations just a few months ago were have a winning record, make it to a bowl, then we'll talk, right? It kind of makes you wonder now, what are your thoughts on that? And I'd be curious to see that in the comments section, because my thoughts are they changed the expectations for me. And I don't necessarily know that I would be mad about the season. I feel like I'm really happy with where the season is right now. And I would not mark it as a disappointment if they missed out on Dallas. But I would be less happy with the season of, say, these final 3 games, they go 1-2. Which is what K Ford actually, because I talked about K Ford gives them a 8% chance to win out. The best percent chance for them to do anything is for the Bearcats to go 1-2 the rest of the way. They have an 84% chance to go 1-2 in their final 3 conference games. K Ford gives them a 42% chance to go 2-1. I kind of feel like Scott Satterfield, Brendan Sorsby, everybody has changed the expectations here that if they don't finish the season, or if they finish the season with more than 2 conference losses, we're going to be like, okay, this was a good year, but it could have been better because we see the talent that's on this team. This team looks like one of the best teams. I firmly believe that if Utah played in Cincinnati, or if UC and Utah played on a neutral field, the game would be a lot closer, and I think that the Bearcats could win. There was something about the environment of Rice-Eccles Stadium and playing at 10:15 p.m. Eastern time. I get it that they travel there a few days beforehand to get used to the time difference, but have you ever traveled to the West Coast for some sort of vacation or something? It takes you a few days to get used to that time shift. Wherever it is that you go on the West Coast, or even, I think they're mountain time, so they're like 2 hours behind there in Salt Lake City, but still the time change messes with you. There's a lot that goes into that. So let's say they play at Arrowhead like they did with Nebraska. I think it's a much closer game, and the Bearcats could possibly win that one. There was just a lot about the environment that forced that. So I think that the Bearcats and the Utes are very comparable. We'll see where the Bearcats stack up with BYU. I think that Texas Tech might be a step above the Bearcats. And so if you're asking me to really handicap them here and say, do I expect the Bearcats to beat Texas Tech if they were to face each other on a neutral field? I wouldn't expect that. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened, but I wouldn't expect it. but I expect them to beat Arizona. I expect them to beat TCU. And I think it's a fair expectation if you say you expect them to beat BYU. I think there's a lot about this team that changes the expectations from where they were to where they are. And so we've got to be honest with ourselves as to how this season ends and how we feel about it, because I think that you would be remiss if you said you'd be okay if they lost the rest of their games and they went into, trying to think of a really random bowl, the Poinsettia Bowl or something. I don't know. There's so many random bowls. They went to the Pop-Tart Bowl. I'd be okay if they went to the Pop-Tart Bowl. I'd love to see the Bearcats in the Pop-Tart Bowl, but just for the sake of the entertainment value of the Pop-Tart Bowl. But if it's not the Big 12 championship, then we have like a different discussion about how the season went, because these last 3 games are really going to form those satisfaction ratings, as it were. But I think that we can all agree that Scott Satterfield has actually reached a level of expectation that we're comfortable with. Because before the season, we weren't there. Before the season, we were thinking, you got to prove it to us. But I think it's fair to say that he has. But how can he step forward with that? The other part of this is the men's basketball part of the equation. Because I don't necessarily think that the football team is in a vacuum here. Because we see the success that they're beginning to have in the conference, and we say, okay, basketball, what you got for us? I get it. They have a brand new roster, but that's a lot of teams nowadays in college basketball. That's not isolated to Clifton. We've got to understand that that's just how college basketball goes now. There's lots of transfers, lots of movement between teams. I mean, who'd have thought that, you have a conference rival, a player that comes from your conference rival, and he's a big part of the team, talking about Mustafa Cham. And when you look at the men's basketball team, it is absolutely fair to expect that they make the tournament. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the expectations and how the Bearcats can meet them and why there's going to be some growth that has to happen before they can meet them and all this other stuff. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. Got some good quotes from Wes Miller, and even have a quote from Shon Abaev about some thoughts pertaining to their first win. But I think that it's important to understand, there is no realm of reality that the Bearcats missed the tournament this year and we're okay. Because I think if they missed the tournament, we've got to have a discussion about whether or not Wes Miller is the coach next year. And I think he understands that. I think every Bearcats fan understands that. But knowing where the Bearcats have been and where they are now, we're past the whole point of, gosh, golly, gee, we're the new kid on the block here in the Big 12, don't you know? Now it's, what are you doing with that? Because the rest of the Big 12 still sees us as, oh, yeah, that plucky Cincinnati school that we added to the roster, that ain't that cute that they're doing well. We got to change that, because here in Clifton, we are expecting them to do the thing. We know what good Bearcats basketball looks like. How does that translate from this brand new roster? So I think for me, and I will respond to your comments. So respond in text, because obviously this is a pre-recorded podcast here, but I will respond to your comments that you have, because I'm curious if you're with me on this. Am I just off base? Because I feel like we're past the time of introductory newness, and now it's, so what are you going to do with it? It's time for the Bearcats to do something with it. But the good news is there were some interesting trends, including a fast-paced offense to keep an eye on early in the season for the basketball team. We'll get Wes Miller's take and Shon Abaev's take on that coming up next. I encourage you to keep the conversation going with me after the show is over on Twitter and on TikTok at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. And you can follow me on Instagram at CarrJeff. Just flip around my username, still with the 3 Fs. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at LO_Bearcats and on Instagram and TikTok at LockedOnBearcats, all one word. So game one, really hard to go too crazy about evaluating things, but there were two trends that I really want to focus on. One is a player, but one is how the team moved on offense. Because in the Wes Miller era, they have not had a good offense. Period. Like I don't necessarily know that there's too good of an argument for that, but we saw something that we haven't seen during Wes Miller's tenure here. We saw a fast-paced offense, and I thought it was intriguing because Wes was asked by Chad Brendel about experimenting with different lineups and really letting guys work through some things, because we did see there were a couple of runs. There weren't a lot, but there were a couple of runs from Western Carolina, and the Bearcats just kind of worked through all of this. This is what Wes Miller had to say about that.
Yeah, I'd say this. I mean, how many times did I call timeout tonight? How many times did I call timeout to stop a run? We talk about being a running team. Most people in college basketball, and I've been guilty of this in past years, don't have the stomach to be a running team, because you got to live with some growing pains, and then there's going to be some stretches where the run goes the other way. I mean, that's just the nature of it. But you got to learn how to kind of fight through those stretches so that you can get on the other side of them. And then you got to live with some, you're going to have some poor decisions, especially early in the year. Whether it's a shot that you shouldn't take or whether it's a pass that wasn't there. And that's where I think you look down at 15 turnovers. But I think the strength of this team, as we get to the Big 12 play, we could be an elite running team. I mean, the passing, the shooting, the ability to finish around the rim, the ability to score in the post box, which I thought you guys could see with Baba and Mood tonight. That's a real thing. And but we're going to have to live with some of the growing pains of it here early. But I think it could be really good.
That was intriguing to me because I noticed a lot of fast-paced stuff, and Kirk Kriisa was one of the biggest catalysts of that because of his ability to just find the long pass. And I think as more guys get used to that, I mentioned this the other day, but as more guys get used to that, we're going to see that be more effective. But overall, there were a lot of possessions where it was like pass, shoot. And even looking on KenPom had them at an average possession length of 13 seconds. And there were only 5 other teams that have played so far that had, shorter average possession length. So I find that very intriguing. I'll see if that continues, because obviously last year that was the opposite. Last year they were one of the slowest teams when it comes to average possession length. They were ranked in the 200s. And just so you know, like KenPom ranks 364 teams in Division I college basketball. And the Bearcats were in the 200s as far as average possession length. Now they're in the top 10, at least after just one game. So obviously we'll monitor that trend and see how it goes. And it's curious to me because I thought, okay, was this just Western Carolina? Was it just how bad their defense was? Is this a one-off, or is this going to be something that continues? Shon Abaev actually had an encouraging point of view on that because of the chemistry that they all feel together, even though they are brand new as far as being teammates.
I feel like we're a really good running team. That's what we preach every day in practice. I feel like we have a lot of talent through across the whole lineup. And I feel like, we love each other on and off the court. I feel like that's what helps us succeed on the court as well.
I think that's very key to note. They preach it every day in practice. This is not just something that they saw and maybe developed during the game and they're like, okay, I think we can exploit this. This is a planned thing. And so just like Wes Miller said, we're going to have to live with some growing pains. I assume they're going to struggle a little bit with Georgia State. Not because Georgia State is like otherworldly good or anything like that, but because they will continue this game plan to try and hone it in and try and refine it before they go up against Dayton. Because you're definitely gonna implement things like this in the big games. It's going to be a lot of fun because, I mean, obviously the team from Norwood knows that the Bearcats are not a fast-moving offense. So if you show up with a fast-moving offense that's at least a little bit more efficient than 15 turnovers, I think you're going to catch them on their heels a little bit. And I would love to see exactly how that all plays out. There's one other thing about this, and I noticed this, and look, any moment that I'm going to get a chance to talk about how awesome this dude is, I'm going to do it because Buck Harris is awesome. And we all saw it. And, he played 9 minutes and he had a wrist thing and all this other stuff, and really hope that the wrist is okay. But Wes was asked after the game about Buck's wrist. And I thought Wes had a great perspective on Buck as a whole.
I don't have much of one other than it was a wrist thing. I think it started in the first half on the breakaway where he tried to go up and jam it. As you guys know, we recruited him because I think the way that he plays the game, the way that he competes is something that our staff and myself completely identify with. And then I feel like our fans, this community, are going to identify with the way that he approaches it. He's a very, very key piece to this team, and we need him to be healthy because he's going to be very important to the things that we're trying to do.
Hand up. I love Buck Harris, and I will continue to say that. Locked On Bearcats is the official podcast of Buck Harris. Okay, maybe not that. It's not like we have some sort of deal with him or something like that, but love watching Buck Harris play. Really hope that he gets back on the court here soon. I don't necessarily know that he would need to play against Georgia State, but if he's healthy enough, I would think he would. But, be cautious with him as you move forward. Obviously, Bearcats went 11 deep in game one. I'd expect they do about the same thing against Georgia State as well. So there's a chance that if we see him, we only see him for a little bit. But I'm going to really love watching him play, and I hope that wrist injury is nothing too serious. But that'll do it for us here today on this edition of Locked On Bearcats. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. I encourage you to become an everydayer by hitting that subscribe button right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. We're on all of the podcast apps, free and available everywhere. Now make sure you check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship game and every game in between. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow.